milestones along the way to track progress. The milestones include, for 2020 exactly, the milestones include reducing malaria case incidence by at least 40%, reducing malaria mortality rates by at least 40%, eliminating malaria in at least 10 countries, and preventing a resurgence of malaria in all countries that are malaria-free. The World Health Organization admits, quote, malaria continues to have a severe socioeconomic impact on our populations. It is one of the causes of household poverty because it results in absenteeism from the daily work activities and from other daily activities, productive living, and income generation. Malaria, the WHO also continues to prevent many school children from attending school due to illness, diminishing their capacity to realize their full potential. End of quote. The comforting thing is that the fight against malaria is relentless. It will pay off when education on environmental cleanliness is accepted as a priority and when governments in the affected areas allocate necessary resources for the fight. It will pay off as research continues and as trial of anti-malaria vaccines continues also. Hope, therefore, is not lost, not just yet. Divine, let's hear from our health experts, from our audience, and from each other so that together we can combat this new, or rather this existing devastating illness in our continent. Over to you, Divine, and let's get going.
Yes, thank you, Asole Sankandeke. Malaria, one of the leading causes of death in Africa, deadly yet preventable and curable. So why is it continuing to kill a lot? Dr. Foje on the line must be from California. Hello, doctor. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Divine, and good afternoon, Asole, and good afternoon, audiences of African Line.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for accepting our invitation. Now, tell me, why has malaria, though preventable, though curable, remained so deadly in Africa? You may want to start with the causes of malaria and then go from there.
Okay, malaria, as we have been told, is a parasite-caused disease caused by 4 varieties of Plasmodium, falciparum, vivax malaria, and the other. Malaria has been with us, we think, even till very ancient times, and has been responsible for a lot of devastating population loss, poor work production, and malaria is said to have affected the colonization of Africa significantly, making it impossible at the time for the colonial masters to settle because they would die from malaria. Why has malaria remained with us in spite of efforts, the discovery of medication, improvement in prevention strategy, and an improvement in the nutrition of the population and its health? The reasons are multiple. The most significant is the nature of immunity to malaria. We will discuss that a bit further. But in this talk, I was going to just lay emphasis on some clinical aspects of malaria and some aspects of malaria which we still have to think about. Because think about it. If the medication to eliminate the parasite from the sick patient are efficient, then why can we not, in a single day, all take some medication and hope that we eliminate it from our community and prevent malaria that way? The reason we don't do that is that we will again get reinfested from the mosquito. So an action in the community alone will not eliminate malaria. It must be coupled with environmental action and also the control of the parasite. That said, Malaria is a very, very interesting illness because the first attack can be very dramatic. The person may wake up with a fever or without fever, with altered consciousness or without altered consciousness, with bodily pain, headache, sweating, and in the chronic patient or the patient who has had malaria after some time, these fevers, body ache, headache, body weakness, anemia, jaundice will come intermittently every 2-3 days. Now, why is malaria still with us? That's the question. We need to all be educated on the strategy to be able to reduce significantly the impact of the disease. We need all to be involved in the environmental action that will remove mosquito breeding places. We need all to be involved with action that will keep us away from the mosquito at the moment it feeds, which is from dusk to dawn. We need to be involved in action, not only to eliminate the mosquito breeding places in our environment, but to deliberately eliminate the larvae from these areas. And that needs intensive financing, it needs intensive education, it needs a persistent strategy to achieve goals that we must define very clearly. Now, what is malaria? We said it was an infection of the blood by parasite transmitted by the female mosquito. This parasite goes through a cycle in the red blood cells, breaking it up, and in the liver, making it inflame and large. The first symptoms of malaria are usually general body aches, weakness, then headache, then joint pains, general weakness, unconsciousness in those who are having it for the first time and in babies, and sometimes just death. We wake up in the morning and the person who was alive the previous day is dead. And when we examine it, we find he has malaria parasite in the blood, the spleen is enlarged, the liver is enlarged, and they may be very anemic. Or the kidney might have just shut down because the breakage of the blood was massive, causing what we call black water fever. So they pass out dark urine, and or they may just suffer severe anemia. The jaundice in malaria is usually not very prominent. Some people die from malaria because they have what we call acute rhabdomyolysis. That means their muscles just break down. They can't get up. Their heart doesn't work properly. Some die because of convulsion, like in children, may be associated with the high temperature, but it's also associated with the parasite invading the brain. Coma in malaria can sometimes be very difficult to ascertain unless you do the blood smear and you think about it all the time. Now, there are some group of people who are thought to be somehow prevented from the very severe or more recurrent attacks of malaria, and these are people with a sickle cell trait. I would leave that as that. Malaria, of course, as I said, affects our performance at work because most people get ill. They have to stay off work when they are very, very sick. Remember that malaria is with us. It has been with us for a long time, and that it even in one country, you may find that the incidence of the illness varies from the very forest areas to the grassland areas. That was the case in Cameroon. Before independence, there was more malaria in the southwest of Cameroon than in the northwest of Cameroon. But over time, with movement of people and transportation, easy transportation, the disease is spreading almost everywhere. Why is malaria with us? Again, if we had developed immunity that was good enough to eliminate the parasite, then we will not be talking about malaria, because most people will get an attack and they will get immunity. But unfortunately, malaria doesn't confer long-term immunity. It confers immunity we can put in quotes pre-immunity. It means it reduces the intensity of the attacks, but it doesn't stop you from getting the illness. And of course, that is due to the changing antigen on the surface of the parasite and its multiple stages in the blood. Malaria has to be prevented. As I said, action in the environment is necessary. Treatment of cases is necessary. Adequate treatment of cases is necessary. Prophylaxis, drug prophylaxis is necessary for those who travel into the area and those who stay in the area. The pregnant women who may miscarry their children because they have malaria. This is, in short, the kind of thing I wanted us to talk about. Later on, we may go detailing into the drug treatment, the new medication, atenomycin, quinine, 8-aminoquinolanes, and sulfonamide, progranil. But for now, I think this is the general things I wanted to mention about malaria.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jonas Project, talking to us from California. We are very pleased that you're on with us. There are other medical experts on the line. If they feel like saying something, please just indicate, and we will get you in. All that being said, Dr. Project, now this malaria has been with us for centuries. But does it continue to exist because there is lack of goodwill on the part of the authorities concerned? Or is it that the human being is just indifferent to this devastating disease?
That's a difficult question, because the truth of the matter is that if you look into our community historically, they had, periods when they devised some treatment for malaria that and they expected the whole village or the whole town to take. Government from independence made an effort to control malaria. It is not so much the will than the fear of the magnitude of the problem and the lack of persistence in what has proven of value. Not because the governments are uncaring. I don't believe it is uncaring. It is the fact that the means necessary to achieve the goals in malaria are very big. So the financial commitment, the education of the people that is necessary is all very, very intensive. It requires a lot of financing. It requires a lot of educating. What else would I say?
Yes, but what else will you say? But talking about educating the people, is it not you and I who should educate ourselves? Do we have to have government behind us? Do we have to have the sanitary inspector visiting our compounds to be sure that the standing pools of water behind our houses are drained? Do we need all that to happen? Don't we as human beings just have to know that keeping our immediate environment clean will extend to the entire community?
Yeah, I agree with you, Asong. All those things are important, for us to be able to control malaria. But even more important is the way we build, is the way we sanitize our environment. If we had great cities built properly, where there was no standing water, the drainage was worked out by engineers, then we will be able to control malaria. Commitment of individuals, yes. I remember as a young person in Limbe, the sanitary officer will come and say, clean your environment. People will remove all the tins, the empty cans around their houses, drain the standing water. I don't know, at the present time, such action is not so regular, and we need such action. We need cities that are properly filled to avoid standing water and treat standing water. We need a sanitary team that should go around and spray the mosquito breeding places. It happens here in the United States. It can happen in Africa too. Of course, all these things are liquidity intensive. But we need, most important, a persistent and a long-term commitment to eliminating malaria. Let us all have a long-term commitment. Let us be malaria conscious, just in the same way as we're conscious of preparing good, healthy food for our family. We should also be able to have the commitment to keep our families healthy through action in our environment. Don't throw things around, empty the standing water, drain them, make sure that in the short term we have treated mosquito nets. In fact, when I went to secondary school, I had malaria only when I didn't use the bed tent. Once I started using my tent after it was inspected by the teacher or by the surveillance general. We never had malaria. So these are very important actions we can take together. But we must not be disillusioned, because as we have seen with drug prophylaxis, there can be resistance to the medication. And when there's resistance to the medication, then all our efforts will be in vain, because the drug prophylaxis will not work. And we can't depend on long-term control of malaria by thinking only in terms of drug prophylaxis. No, we must. Governmental action is absolutely necessary. Yeah, over to you, Dylan.
All right. I am getting signals that Dr. Brown Hilda is also on the line from the state of West Virginia. Brown Hilda was born in West Africa and certainly grew up in the bastion of malaria, which is, of course, Africa. We're talking about that. Dr. Brown Hilda, before I get back to Dr. Fojem, I have a question for you. Are you available now?
Yes, I am online.
Now, Brown Hilda, you are a mother. Yes, you are a mother, and more so a mother of girls. You are a woman yourself. My question has to do with your state as a woman, as a mother. Would you be concerned if a woman came with malaria and pregnant at the same time? That's my first question. Second question is malaria going to attack a man differently, or is the consequence of malaria on man different from the consequence of that on a woman? And how would children respond to malaria at different, do their ages matter? These are the questions I have for you. Dr. Brunhilde, before we get to Dr. Koje again.
Okay, all right. Thank you for having me online as well, or on board. Malaria, the most susceptible individuals for malaria include children, age up to maybe 6 to 36 months, so about 3 years. Pregnant women, immunocompromised people as well. And yes, children are more vulnerable, and they can actually have more severe disease, which includes including the cerebral malaria. Now, so I will be concerned as a mother and in general for because of this increased risk in children. Now, not only do these children, not only are they, for instance, if they develop the severe malaria, which could involve the cerebral malaria with convulsions, they also may have even sequelae from the malaria. So they can actually have some underlying neurological deficiencies after being treated for this. And cerebral malaria actually has a very high mortality rate, up to 15 to 20%, and even higher in some cases. And the children that are more vulnerable are also those who are malnourished. So yes, definitely, children are to be children are at more risk of the severe malaria. Now, the women as well, pregnant women in particular, had also an increased risk of malaria, as this could cause a preterm or they could cause stillbirth or low birth children if they delivered if they happen to deliver. So we need to pay particular attention to this group of people. So if we have a scenario like this, they need to be in general, malaria actually needs to be treated once you start having symptoms to prevent worsening. But in these two groups, definitely. Now, in endemic areas where you have increased prevalence of malaria, the very young, like we mentioned, and the pregnant women are risk. However, the adults do tend to have partial immunity. So they may not be as severe with their symptoms compared to these two groups.
Now, Dr. Brunhilde, you're welcome on board again. Is there a particular season during which this malaria is most prevalent, or is year-round?
Okay, so this question, I'll probably, I have not practiced in Cameroon, so I may only say based on what I'm reading. I think Dr. Koje may be better after the answer for this question. However, I think the rainy season may be worse. But he can throw more light to this. So I'm not sure about if there's really prevalence in terms of is the season has to do with water, or if there's any other factor that makes the season a factor into malaria prevalence or increased risk of having infection.
Thank you, Divine.
Before Dr. Koje comes in, let me remind our listeners that you can dial into the show and ask our doctors on the line. We are fortunate that we have today two doctors on the line taking your questions. Dr. Brunhilde Santo in the state of West Virginia, United States, and Dr. Jonas Koje in the state of California in the United States, receiving signals that Joseph Akamangwa, himself a medical doctor, is in Italy and listening to this broadcast. Thank you, Joseph. Please let us know. Our producer, Mumba Lingua, is monitoring our Facebook pages to let us know the comments coming. So please, wherever you are listening to this broadcast, wherever on the planet, let us know where you are. That way we will acknowledge you. And you can call from overseas by simply dialing the number 001. Then you go to 712-775-7035. You dial 001-712-775-7035, and when prompted, enter the code 356613. Now, a quick one for you, Dr. Santos. Now, switch over to Dr. Kojo in California. You talked about cerebral malaria. Malaria. What takes it from stage 1 to that stage? Because it looks to me like it is the advanced version, if I may call it so, of malaria. What makes one cerebral malaria, and why that's so deadly?
Okay. Yeah. So this is a severe form of malaria, obviously. Although we do talk about the cerebral malaria, that is not the only severe organ impairment that patients can actually have. It just happens to be sensationalized because of the seizure, and yes, it does have a high mortality rate. The virulence of the parasite has to do with this. So those who are at risk of more severe malaria or cerebral malaria are those I just mentioned earlier, the children, the immune host response. So if you're immunocompromised, and and Plasmodium falciparum has actually been shown to be one of the most virulent and will tend to cause death more than the other parasites. And also, when you delay the treatment, that may actually develop. The malaria may actually become more severe. However,
okay. Go ahead, please.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
However, in addition to cerebral malaria, because we talk about it, these patients can also have severe what they call metabolic acidosis. They can also have renal failure. They can have respiratory distress and going to respiratory failure. They can have severe anemia, which can lead to even what they call disseminated intravascular coagulation, which just means that their clotting system becomes so activated that they start clotting a lot. They clog up their small blood vessels and consume their clotting factors, and then start bleeding. And this is also deadly. They can have severe liver disease. They can have hypoglycemia. That is something that needs to be paid attention to. And so they deplete their glucose levels, and we have to pay attention to this because these patients can also manifest with palpitation, tachycardia. They can have sweating, and you may be confused. You may confuse this to the symptoms of malaria themselves. So, in addition to cerebral malaria with a high mortality rate, we also have these other end organ damages that I just mentioned, which could be deadly.
Thank you, Dr. Brown-Hilda. Africa Online Broadcast is aired every Sunday, 3 p.m. Washington, D.C. time, 8 p.m. in Central and West Africa. That's also, I think, the time in most of Western Europe, or slightly different, and 9 p.m. in Southern African countries. We are so blessed on Africa Online with so many doctors and willing to share their knowledge for free. Thank you, Brown-Hilda. We'll come back to you, but let me switch over to Dr. Jonas Fojen now in California. Doctor, how can you explain that a lot of our parents in living in very rural areas, they hardly have this malaria? Is it that the mosquitoes are just tired biting them, or their bodies are tired taking in more malaria disease? What is it that they get so resistant? What leads to resistance to malaria? I'm not talking about resistance to treatment. I'm talking about resistance to malaria. What leads to it? And Dr. Brown-Hilda talked about seasons. Are there some seasons in Africa that you're going to have the propensity for people to have malaria or not? Over to you, Dr. Jonas Fojen.
Thank you, Divine, and thank Dr. Brown-Hilda for a thoroughly done job. The two questions are what makes some people in some rural areas resistant, as they say, to malaria. I think we must take into consideration that malaria is not only the problem of the man and his environment. And depending on the nature of your environment, the water drainage in the air system in the area, the presence of the mosquito and its activities, we can have an effect on the incidence of the malaria. It means that in certain rural areas, as I suggested, at independence or just before independence, in the Northwest, people hardly had real malaria. They had fever from other small viruses and other things. They didn't have a lot of real malaria. It was only after the people started mixing, the people in the Northwest went to the CDC, they came back on holiday, and they bought stuff, they had tin food, they threw the tins around, they threw stuff around. That malaria became common in the Northwest province. In similar manner, there are communities who are so, their system, the environment is so structured that there is no standing water. And without standing water, the parasite cannot develop. Therefore, it is important to control standing water in any environment as part of the strategy to get malaria out of our environment. As concerns the people, individuals' immunity, I will start with an anecdote. In 1992, I was in Nguti General Hospital. It's a Catholic hospital, St. John of God, and I met this man whom the hospital had built, in front of whose house the hospital had built. But for all his life, he was 90 the day he saw me, he had never had malaria. But on this day, he told me, oh, I think I have malaria, my joints are aching, I'm feeling weak. And even then, I examined him, he had no temperature, he had no malaria parasite in his blood. And all I recommended for him was stay and rest in the hospital. I gave him like a weekend in the hospital in one of the senior suites, and he was happy to go home. So there are some people who are resistant to malaria. We don't know how it works out. We don't know whether the initial attack was not massive enough for them to develop the symptom, but they are resistant. They don't have malaria of the same intensity like most other people. And these people are within populations which have been exposed to malaria rather than newcomers to the environment. We don't know whether probably they had some pre-immunity at birth or anything like that. And especially, as I mentioned, the case of the sickler and the person with carrying the sickle trait. They show resistance, but that we can guess is related to the fact that their hemoglobin is already is defective, and so doesn't allow the amount of oxygen that will be retained in a cell for the parasite to develop. Outside these speculations, I can't really find a clue why some people are immune to malaria, in quote, immune in quotes, or why some people or some areas are without malaria for a time.
Before I get to Athon for another question, a quick one here, Dr. Foje. You mentioned drug prophylaxis. What did you mean by that? Can I just go to the pharmacy? Oh, and by the way, please, if you are overseas or anywhere listening to this show, you can message us your questions. We have two very qualified medical doctors on the line. Your questions or comments will be relayed to Brown Gilder and Dr. Jonas Foje. I am having indications that Fatoun Jie, a Senghor, is listening to us in Ivory Coast, Tilda in Cameroon, and many other people all around the planet. So please let us know where you are listening to this broadcast. So, Dr. Foje, tell me, what did you mean by drug prophylaxis?
Yeah, drug prophylaxis is using medication that will kill the parasite in a manner as to prevent infestation or the infestation by the malaria parasite. That's to use medication that is used to treat malaria to prevent infestation of malaria. And two groups of individuals are very important, or three groups we can say are very important in this aspect. They are the traveler who travels from the United States, for example, to Cameroon. Then you need to give him a certain level of anti-malarial in his blood so that he may not get infested. And it is important to emphasize the idea of a certain level of drop in his blood, because in the past people took one shot, a few tablets, and on arrival, but then they never continued through their stay. When they return back. Now the attitude is to give them this medication. It could be Proguanil, it could be Malaria. Give them prior to, during, and after they leave the malaria area. But prophylaxis for malaria goes beyond just this medication for the traveler. In Cameroon in general and in Africa, we do give Livaquine to pregnant ladies at regular intervals as a safer approach to drug prevention of malaria. We do give them, but of course, prevention must also take into account proper treatment of affected individuals because of the problem of drug resistance. As you may know, in Kumba, we developed a lot of resistance to the amino acid phenolanes and the Livaquine, and we had to use quinine. And even some people suggested that there was resistance to quinine, so we had to bring in artemisinin. So it is important that when we do when we treat malaria, we should treat it adequate dose of medication, adequate number, and if control the parasite in the blood to make sure that the patient has really been cured and is not harboring a resistant parasite. That said, I wanted to just comment a bit on cerebral malaria. Of course, when you say cerebral malaria, in these days, or in the days I was in Bamenda, most people did not even think of the babies who had it. They always had it. They didn't think of the pregnant woman or the newcomer who may have it. It was a group of teenagers from secondary school, PSS, A Lady of Lourdes, Sacred Heart, women in A Lady of Lourdes, who will come with psychological problems. They are excited, they're semi-conscious, and everybody will say they had cerebral malaria. But in my experience, none of these young ladies ever had malaria parasite in their blood, and sometimes just observing them in hospital was enough. But of course, if you check in the records, you find that most of them received malaria treatment, even though they had no malaria parasite. And on leaving the hospital, some were diagnosed as cerebral malaria, and they will come back again. So these are people who should be excluded from the cerebral malaria group and referred to probably psychological counseling. Cerebral malaria, too, as we said, it may not entirely be, the patient may be suffering from the cerebral because of the effects of the malaria, not as the direct effect of the parasite on the brain, but as Dr. Brunhilde said, it could be hypoglycemia as well, because these children don't eat, they vomit, they throw up, and if there's no way to feed them properly parentally, by giving them some infusion, they go into hypo and they may suffer a lot of consequences as a result of the hypoglycemia. Of course, the typical black water fever, as I said, the patient who pees black urine and sometimes maybe scanty, sometimes they just be in right quantity but very black because the blood has been massively hemolyzed. The muscles have been broken up and the protein from the muscles has gone to the kidney and blocked it. That too can cause unconsciousness for the reason of the kidney and not necessarily the reason of the brain parasite. But those are tiny little details which every doctor knows. So malaria is with us. Malaria is a concern. Malaria is of economic concern. Malaria is a social concern because if somebody comes, some people just have relatives who have malaria all the time, and now they call them witches, witchcraft, all those kinds of stuff. So, you see, malaria impacts our life in many more ways than the obvious, which is giving us an attack which puts us in the hospital bed.
Okay, Doctor, let's start with Asong if he probably has a question at this point. Asong?
Well, malaria is all around us, devastating as it is. And as we said, I put this question to Dr. Brown-Hilda earlier. Is it prone to some colder regions or to warmer regions? Why is it that in those days when you were growing up in Cameroon, it was more prevalent in Victoria, but not in Bamenda, but recently it is all over the place. So does the climate play a role in where the mosquitoes exist? Dr. Jonathan.
Yeah, thank you, Asong, for reminding me to answer that question. As I said, at independence or before independence, the malaria was mostly in the coast. People brought the malaria from the coast, and it was said to be due to the bad water or the sea water or whatever, the sea breeze. But with time, malaria got established because the mosquito was already in our environment. Seasonal variation in malaria has a lot to do with the period when the parasite, the mosquito thrives, because there's humidity, there's standing water about, and therefore malaria tends to be a lot more common in the rainy season than in the dry season. And that, I think, the simple explanation is the water, the rain, the standing water, the mosquito growing better when there's water. But now we find that malaria is not available in the northern hemisphere, in England or Denmark or Sweden. There's no malaria. Now, therefore, the climate must have something to do with it. I think a certain temperature, certain average temperature determines whether the mosquito will thrive or not. I think it has to do with the mosquito and the environment. And you know, generally these countries are better drained. But I think it has been observed that malaria was gradually getting out further north into the Mediterranean, the North Mediterranean, and so on and so forth. But yes, there is a seasonal variation, and there is a climatic factor to malaria.
Thank you.
Yes, Divine. Over to you, Divine.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Jonas Fojue, for those clarifications. Let me switch over now to Dr. Brown-Hilda Santo in the state of West Virginia. And before I ask the question, we would like to inform our listeners worldwide that in 10 minutes, that'll be top of the hour, 4 o'clock, 4 p.m. in Washington, D.C., Reverend Palm, who is the chair of Africa Online Media Organizational Corporation, will be coming in with some important statements. Now, let me switch over to Brown Hilda. By the way, Fatunje Senghor in Ivory Coast, if you have experiences in Ivory Coast concerning malaria, please message us on Facebook or wherever you are. We have people listening to us in South Africa, all over the place. Let us know what your experiences there are, or your personal experiences. Our producer, Mbalingwa, is monitoring the Facebook, where, of course, we're going live on Facebook to see what comments are coming so we can relay the comments or questions to our medical doctors on the line. Now, Brown Hilda, the question I have for you, I have heard about malaria 1+, malaria 3+, 2+. What's the differences between the pluses in malaria? Some mathematics?
Okay. All right. So before I even go into that, and I will confess, Dr. Forget may be better at the 1+, 2+, 3+, but it may just mean pretty much what it means is the parasitemia. So which means the amount of blood, the percentage of blood of parasite that is in in your RBCs or in your blood. And depending on the percentage, that also determines the severity. And actually, the severity of the malaria, the treatment, you can actually monitor the treatment in areas where you have like maybe developed countries, where you have that capability and the infrastructure to do daily blood work and smears to check if the parasitemia is decreasing. That parasitemia means the parasite quantity in the blood. So the more you have, the more pluses you have, that just indicates that that's a higher percentage of parasite, and generally it correlates with the symptoms. Now, I say generally because in those patients who have partial immunity, which we just talked about, some of those adults who have been living in the endemic areas, some of them may have more pluses without having so much symptoms. But in general, that means that. Now, I was also going to add to what Dr. Forget said about prophylaxis. In addition to what he has said, it is true the patients need to have an adequate amount of medication in their body. But it is also important, that's before traveling, it is also important to know that even after you come back from the endemic area, you have to continue taking the medication. That's very, very important. Now, it depends on what medications. Now, in the US, I'm sure different areas have different medications, but I like to use generic names because everybody understands them. Versus the trade names, it depends on the different countries. In the US, as Dr. Forget rightly said, Malaron. Malaron is a combination of two medications that they can use for prophylaxis. They can also use mefloquine, and they can use doxycycline. Now, the difference in those is it depends on which one you're using. With the Malaron, you take it a day to two before. You take it before you travel. You take it throughout your stay in the endemic zone, and then when you come back, you take it for another week. The mefloquine, the advantage of mefloquine is that it can be weekly. You take it about 2 to 3 weeks before you travel throughout your stay, and when you come back for 4 weeks. And doxycycline, likewise, when you come back for 4 weeks. Now, I know we seem to be talking about Africa only, but we should understand that malaria is also found in Asia, in Central America. Now, why do I say this? It is important because unlike in Cameroon or other African countries where Plasmodium falciparum may be the predominant type of predominant species of the Plasmodium, in Central America and some other Central America and even Asia, in some areas, you may have Plasmodium vivax or Plasmodium ovale. And these Plasmodiums are a little bit different in the sense that during their life cycle, one stage of their life cycle involves hibernating, almost like living in a dormant state in the liver, where they're quiet, they don't do anything. And even after you return from these zones, you may actually, sometimes or patients who've been infected by this particular species of Plasmodium may actually develop malaria even months and sometimes even years, up to 3-4 years, sometimes even. So if you're traveling to these zones, some of the medications that may be for prophylaxis, one of them actually in particular is Primaquine. This is one of the medications that's the only medication I think so far that actually kills that dormant state of that life cycle of that part of the life cycle that lives in the liver. So it is important if you're traveling to South America, because I know some of us travel. I mean, some people may travel to South America or even to Central America or even to Asia, and also in some Asian areas like Cambodia, you may also have resistance to mefloquine. So you have to actually, this has to be tailored with your physician, and obviously looking at the CDC guidelines, Center for Disease Control. Now, in addition to chemoprophylaxis, which is the medications, there are certain things that we can do as travelers also. You can, when you travel, you can get insect repellents. Okay. You wear long clothing. You avoid outdoor exposure between dusk and dawn, which are dusk and dawn because that's actually the time when the Anopheles mosquito comes out to feed. You sleep obviously in tents that have been treated. So treated tents with insecticides like permethrin. These are toxic to the insects. And obviously you stay, if you're in a hot zone, you stay in an air-conditioned environment. So those are some of the things that you do as also prevention in addition to the chemoprophylaxis.
A quick question for you, Dr. Brown-Hilda. We know the enemy, Anopheles mosquito. I mean, do you also find, if we know the enemy, one would think that there should be the vaccine against malaria. Am I just not aware of it because I don't think there is one yet? Why can't?
So there is no. You're right. I actually had to try to look up and see. There is one vaccine that it has a long letters attached to it. There's one vaccine that I think came out, was published in the New England Journal of Medicine, I think in 2011, and that was kind of promising in the sense that they thought it had some protection, but they actually looked at children between 7 months and 36 or 37 months. And they realized over time that this did wane. It wasn't, initially it did give some protection, so partial protection, but then it waned over time. And in 2015, October 2015, there are two committees, Strategic Advisory Group of Experts on Immunization and the Malaria Policy Advisory Committee now decided not to recommend widespread use of this vaccine. So, to my knowledge, I don't think there is one yet that's recommended, but, I don't know if Dr. Forjay has more information on that.
Before we go over to Dr. Forjay, it's about 4 o'clock. I am going to be inviting, now both doctors, please stay on. We have some very important announcements to make. Reverend Pam, chair of Africa Online Media Organization or Corporation, will be coming in almost in a moment. And then we will be hearing also from our Assembly Fan Communicator. Hello, Reverend Pam. How is Houston, Texas today?
Hello, Divine, Song, Dr. Forjay, Dr. Santos, and all our listeners around the globe. I'm excited I'm able to join you guys. I just left service. So I want to thank both of our doctors on behalf of African Media Corporation. They have both been our guests and we are keeping track of your influence is not in vain, so we're very good. And the announcement, you'll be getting some letters from me because we're thinking about, putting together a medical solutions team or inviting several physicians to go to our website, which is www.africaonline.tv. You'll be able to see a health corner. All our listeners have visited our website, That's not for now. Because we have a statement there. It reads, Africa Online encourages.
Hello, Doctor. Hello, Reverend Pam. Maybe you want to switch your lines because we're not getting.
You can't hear me. You can't hear me.
Not quite.
Kind of an echo. It's a kind of echo.
Maybe we take on the subject for next week while we're giving Reverend Pam maybe time to maybe switch her lines. What do we have?
Reverend Pam, there is an echo from you. Maybe switch your lines as Divine says. And the topic for next week, that is what Divine wants me to come to. Reverend Pam will also be talking about it. Well, we all know about working in both in Africa and in the diaspora. So unemployment seems to stare the African in the face wherever they go, whether in the continent or out in the diaspora. We leave our countries believing that the grass is greener in Uncle Sam's backyard or in Uncle Tom's backyard or whoever's backyard. But when we get over there, we realize that it is not as easy as we thought to be able to get a job. So what is it all about, this unemployment facing the African in the face all over the world, from Africa to the European countries, to South America, to North America, and so on. So unemployment among Africans in the world, especially in Africa, of course. So what is the cause of all this? Why are we so unfortunate, if I can say it, put it that way, to find jobs wherever we go, even though we left home believing that the grass is greener over there. Now Reverend Pam is back, and I think she'll pick the cue. She'll pick on that cue and then continue with what she was saying.
Okay, thank you, Nia Song. I think Africa Online needs to come up with a carrier, because all these other people don't seem to be able to service us. But anyway, back to what I was saying. I'm hoping that our guests, and our listeners have all visited our website, which is www.africaonline.tv. We launched it last week. And if you have not, I would really encourage everyone around the globe to access our website. It's a beautiful website. A lot of work went into it. Lady Uzo did the technical part. I did the pretty part. But I think the feedbacks we've gotten, everybody's very impressed with it. And if you have any suggestions, please email them to customerservice@africaonline.tv.xyz. And like I was saying earlier before my phone gave up on me, we are encouraging healthcare professionals around the world to submit their articles and videos, not just healthcare professionals, but this for the health corner, because we, as an organization, we tackle at least one healthcare subject every month, because healthcare is a major issue in Africa. However, for the non-healthcare professionals, you're not left behind. We encourage everybody to submit articles, and we'll categorize them on our website and give you credit for it. But I want to talk about sponsorship. I would encourage everybody. For the past 1 year, Africa Online has not raised funds. We've been self-funded. And over the past year, we had several people ask us about advertising. Some asked us about sponsoring. They said what we're doing is so great. Except for the subject on Operation Borehole 54, where we are going to supply a borehole, at least one borehole in each of the 54 nations in Africa. We've not had any other commitments. So for that project, we had 5 sponsors. And not that I'm trying to be a feminist here, but all the sponsors happen to be females. So we're encouraging the men, starting with our brothers on this line, and get all the other men to jump on board and not be left behind by the women. So we have to supply water to Africa. And we're going to, in the months ahead, our solutions team will put together, a criteria on how we're going to go about selecting which villages. But these boreholes are going to go in remote areas. If you go to the website, as I said, for today, I want to focus on the sponsorship part. When you go on there, we have bronze sponsors, we have silver, we have gold, we have
platinum
sponsors, we have emerald, we have diamond, we have different sponsors. Yeah, and so, Divine, I'm going to have you, Oni Asong, talk about fundraising. Somebody just rang my doorbell. I'll be back in a minute.
Yes, so thank you, Reverend Pam. We cannot do, it's not enough to identify problems. When you see a table is broken, you need to fix it. There are lots of things we can do for our people in Africa, given the opportunities we have overseas. That's one reason why we need help from you. So far, we have auto-financed all the things we're doing, including, but not limited to broadcast equipment. So we need a lot of help from everyone, our doctors, our engineers, our lawyers, our listeners all over the world, and just go on the website. There's so much we can do together. As Tony Van Kemlefe wanted to add, our doctors will still continuing the subject of malaria a few minutes from now.
Yes. Yeah, when you go on our website on the home page, you will see like us on Facebook. You click on that and you'll get to like us. And of course, the more you like us, the more we get worldwide. And then, of course, there is also a button there where you can click on to donate to Support Africa Online. As Divine said, we've done this individually from the start. 3 of us have been working on this, and we look forward to having all of you join us to make this the success story that we want it to be. We look forward to all of you chipping in and making it work for us. And so that being said, as I was saying before, the topic for next week, we should not forget, will be unemployment among Africans in Africa and in the diaspora. Why is it so? Why do people not have jobs when they cross the ocean? And then, of course, many people believe that their certificates from their countries will be immediately recognized when they come. But in North America especially, it's not always the case. Have you faced that situation? Tell your story. Join us on Africa Online. And let us not just talk topics, but let us also pick ways and means of making it a real success story. Divine?
Yes, tell your story, my story about malaria, and probably that's going to lead to me talking to Dr. Fojua Brown-Hilda. Then Reverend Pam at some point will come in to make some remarks about the area she was talking about as administrator of the corporation. When I was in Cameroon, I was used to having recurrent attacks of malaria, even with the treatment. When I came at some point to the United States, I was being tested for HIV and AIDS. Question to Dr. Brown-Hilda, then the recurrence of malaria to Dr. Fojua. First to you, Brown-Hilda, why is it that in North America and Europe, doctors are aware about malaria? Why is it so? I mean, you have malaria attack and they're testing you for HIV.
Because number one, unfortunately, both in medical school and residency, malaria and many other tropical diseases are not taught in details. In fact, if you're lucky, you could maybe just talk about it briefly. For those who do infectious disease fellowship, they may have exposure to that. I think they probably are the ones who have the most exposure among the physicians in the U.S. So that may be, part of it could be, the lack of knowledge about this or ignorance. And then there's also a stereotype. That's the truth about it. Because, you're from Africa, with an accent and, maybe you have some of the symptoms which are vague. The symptoms can be attributed to anything, sweating, nausea and vomiting, diarrhea, and, so some, they may want to rule out that, maybe based on ignorance and based on stereotypes. And unfortunately, the fact that we are not exposed, or physicians in the U.S. are not exposed to treating patients with malaria, plays a lot into why they look into other areas instead of trying to get a good history and physical. Because if anybody has fever or some of these symptoms, and on the history you realize they were from a malaria endemic area, then that should be on your differential. Although, as I mentioned also in the beginning, certain types of plasmodium may have the ovale and the vivax may show up after years even. But it has to do with the education, ignorance, and maybe stereotypes.
Now, before I switch over to Dr. Foje, if somebody came from Africa, maybe in the United States, and then or went to Europe and is having malaria attacks, is it to say that they cannot be treated here, given that the doctors were not exposed to tropical diseases during their training in medical schools?
I'm sorry, so the question is if they cannot be treated for malaria here?
Yes. People coming from Africa.
They can. So the important thing is to recognize that the patient has malaria. So if they're able to recognize it on time and prevent the patient from going into severe malaria, or if the patient comes in with severe malaria, unfortunately, with some of them, which includes the cerebral malaria, which includes renal failure, pretty much some of what I just mentioned, some of those severe end organ damages. If you don't recognize it, then the patient may die.
Yeah, one thing that has also been, one thing that I also noticed, Dr. Brown-Hilda, one thing I noticed here in North America is that you come in with malaria, you are immediately put in isolation. I mean, is this an infectious disease? I didn't think so.
It's not. I mean, it's an infectious disease, but it's not if it's transmitted, transmittable from well, it still goes with ignorance. It still goes with the same thing. The lack of training, on inadequate training with how to handle tropical diseases, and ignorance. So it has to go. It has to do with that. But it cannot be contracted by contact or inhalation, or how it gets transmitted.
Dr. Foje,
okay, Ryan, you say you have a question for Dr. Foje.
Yes, Dr. Foje, probably to throw more light on the pluses of malaria 1+, malaria 2+. What arithmetic what causes the 1+? And then my second question to you, Dr. Foje, has to do with recurrence. When I was in Africa, I used to have recurrent attacks of malaria. How do you explain that phenomenon?
Okay. Now the question of 1+, 2+, 3+, 4+, as Dr. Brown-Hilda has said, is the percentage of parasitemia. If most of the blood cells are infected with 4+, if it is 75% infected with 3+, and if it is 25% in the 1+, that's as simple as it is. Now, the question of recurrent malaria and also malaria many years after leaving Africa, those are very interesting aspects. Recurrent malaria may not necessarily be recurrent. It may well be reinfestation. Yeah, that is the patient has gone back and is bitten by insects. He has malaria, and then if he treats it in a month, he is bitten by the mosquito more massively because there is no true immunity. There's just that immunity. So he gets malaria again, and so forth, so on and so forth. So the recurrence of malaria is the recurrence of insect bite, transmission in the May. That is the other point which Dr. Brown-Hilda not withstanding. That the other point is that P. ovale and virus do sometimes persist in your system without actually showing in the blood. They persist in the tissue, and they may do that for as long as 4 years. When I was in England, there was an African who came from Newcastle. Each time they said there was no malaria in his blood. This is an anecdotal one. Science proof. But this is 4 years. They sent him to the Institute of Parasitology in Liverpool. Now he goes there, they said, we can't find any malaria in your blood. So we sent him back, and he meets, I think it was Dr. Balimba. Balimba is a gynecologist with the military in Yaoundé. And Balimba said, oh no, I do like Nigerians do, you know. I think this, if you think you have malaria, you have malaria. I'll give you the treatment. And he gave him malaria treatment, and the patient got well. Now, that said, I call it anecdotal because there are other anecdotal stories too. When I went back to Africa, when Professor Ngu went back to Africa, all of a sudden I had that pain in my big toe, and I said, my goodness, the gout is welcome now. And so I thought I had gout. I went and checked myself, and so Professor Ngu thought he had gout. He went and checked himself. There was no gout. And I didn't think I had malaria, so I took, but I went to Professor Ngu and told him, look, I'm feeling a lot of gout, but I don't think that my uric acid level is not raised. And he said, take malaria treatment. And I went and took malaria treatment, and my pain in my big toe disappeared.
Okay, Doc, yeah, we take the point. We have 15 minutes to the end of the program. We cannot talk about malaria as Africans without talking about traditional treatment. We'll give it a few minutes and then go over to Reverend Pam. Brown Hilda, I know you are not so much a fan of traditional treatment, but can you just dismiss that outrightly that traditional treatment doesn't work? The mango leaves, the purple leaves, the pineapple leaves.
Well, actually, you know, I think I posted something on the forum or in the forum about some of the some of the malaria medications have been extracted from plants. So as much as, you know, if the purple leaves or the mango or whatever leaves are working, then it is very possible that there is some ingredient in those leaves or those plants that do treat the malaria. So I wouldn't really say traditional herbs do not work. That's not true.
Dr. Foje, you were in Cameroon for a long time, many years of hands-on experience. Gideon Mulu, thank you. You say you are in Germany listening to this broadcast. Rosetta, also in Delaware, thank you for tuning in. Please spread the message, share the video, that way lots of people can follow. You can also message us online, and we will relay your questions or comments to our medical doctors. I'll be asking Dr. Foje about traditional treatment of malaria, given that you practiced in Africa for a very long time. What were your experiences, Doc?
Hello, Divine. I didn't hear you very well, but I think Dr. Brown was commenting about traditional treatment and malaria. Let me just check in something on that. It is well known that lemongrass we have in Cameroon can affect the outcome of malaria. In fact, Professor Moneto, who was the dean of the medical school for many years, opened the Kampala school, always took the lemongrass for his malaria as well as the other medication. And he thought it played a very important role in his healing. Now, generally, traditionally, when people have malaria, they shiver, and sometimes when you go to the traditional doctor, they will give some, I think it's guava leaf, mango leaf, and whatever the Dr. Bronhill said. They will boil it and then put you under a blanket with this boiled stuff. And you are supposed to inhale the liquid, and you are supposed to sweat. And somehow people feel better, and some people actually heal their malaria that way. But traditional treatment, yeah, there are some leaves people use. But I'm not a big fan of traditional medicine because there is the normal pharmaceutical products which are useful. Now, the last thing you wanted me to comment about, I didn't get it because I was on the train. I've actually done the journey while we're talking. Yeah.
Well, we'll get to that, but let me, at this point, switch to Reverend Pam. Reverend Pam, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Divine. Yeah, back to, obviously, I got interrupted. Somebody doesn't want us to raise funds, but too bad. Anyway, back to our sponsorship area of the website. I just want to encourage our listeners, if you have a loved ones, your parents, or some cause that you want to, to publicize, our website is a good place to do that. We actually have a couple of people that have reached out to us. They want to advertise their foundation on our website, and we've had other individuals that have other courses. So if you go to our sponsorship, the sponsors, the level start from bronze, which is from $250, and then go through silver. I'm not going to go through details because everybody can read, but there's no limit as to sponsorship. However, somebody asked me a question: what if somebody wants to donate $100? You're welcome to donate. There's still a donor list that we can publicly acknowledge you on our website. So it doesn't mean that you have to donate just $250. These are just the sponsorship categories. So we have a donor list that we will be publishing, for those that want their donations to be made public. Those who don't want it to be made public, we'll just leave it as anonymous, but we'll put the list there. So we want to encourage everybody because this year, even though our motto says raising awareness, seeking solutions, and making progress. Yes, we've been raising awareness for 1 year. We'll continue to raise awareness, just like we're talking about malaria, but we want to focus this year on solutions. We've talked about the water was part of the stew acronym the Lord gave us. So we want that, and just for our viewers that have been following us for the past 1 year, past few months, when we have a major event, our inaugural board, we want to let people know that this is what Africa Online has done. We have dug X number of boreholes. We have put X number of solar panels in the villages. Nobody should live in darkness. We want to put some street lights, but based on natural power, solar power, not electricity. Because we all know in some of the African countries, especially West Africa, the power or the energy is not reliable. You could be taking a shower and the lights will just go off. So we want to rely on natural power. So if you go to our website, for today I want to focus on sponsorship. In the coming weeks, we'll talk about the different aspects of our website, but I want to encourage everybody to go on there, make a donation. It's 100% tax deductible. We are a 501c3 non-profit organization. So whatever donations you make, you're going to get a tax write-off. It might just mean giving up that, new purse or giving up an extra pair of suit, or you might not even need to give up anything. You might just need to sow a seed. I want to encourage everybody, African Online Media Corporation is a fertile ground to sow your seed, and I want to assure you that we are all volunteers. Nobody gets paid. All of us are volunteers. With the show and the WhatsApp group, they are just like 1% of what we do. A lot of the work is done off the air. So I want to encourage everybody. And for those who don't have the money themselves to pay, you can market this platform. You can market this organization. You can market this non-profit charity organization, because we're about to transform Africa for the betterment of Africa. None of us are benefiting financially or otherwise from this organization. It's a labor of love, and everybody that's been participating, like we're not paying Dr. Brownhilda, we're not paying Dr. Foje. They're giving us priceless information. That's a part of their seed. They're seeding their time. They could be making money right now. Divine, Asong, myself, we could be making money right now, but we're on the air, raising awareness, seeking solutions, and hopefully making progress. So we want to encourage Africans to get involved and put their money where their mouth is. Do something, get a stake in it, get involved in this thing, because this African Online is here to stay, and it's here to make a difference in Africa.
Thank you.
I will go to Suleiman, right?
Yes, it looks like somebody on the line.
Somebody was saying something?
I think he needs to mute the phone. I think somebody's talking in the background.
All right. Now, the question I wanted to ask is, and Dr. Brownhilda can take it, or Dr. Foje, maybe Brownhilda first. Sometimes when people have a type of malaria, you find them talking as if they have some mental problems. Does malaria have anything to do with mental illness, or does it generate or ignite mental illness?
No, actually, that could be a sign of the severe malaria, the cerebral malaria. Part of it is delirium. Like Dr. Foje had mentioned, he had mentioned it when he gave a example on the sicker or girls going off and talking. But you could have psychosis, agitated, maybe combative, and talking to yourself, delirious, with waxing and waning, symptoms. You could have impaired memory, impaired judgment. That's actually one of some of the symptoms of cerebral malaria. Yeah. So it does not make you. So that's what I can say about that.
Yeah, Dr. Brown, I think you are perfectly right there. Cerebral malaria manifests itself in very strange ways. Some people will go unconscious immediately, but others will go through their delirium. They will be in a deep-like state. They will be seeing different things from what is actually there. They will be agitated, but some are completely subdued and are collapsed. There are different cases of cerebral malaria. Now, does malaria stimulate mental illness? Yeah, rightly said. Yeah, these girls who are said to be malaria patients but who don't have malaria parasite, and they behave in the way Define was going to define, don't need malaria treatment. They need psychological counseling and observation. Malaria as a cause of mental illness is unheard of. And especially as most people, when they go through the delirious phase, some hardly remember it. They hardly remember what happened. Even when they remember, it is never with a vengeance, with that, I say, oh my goodness, I saw you attacking me. Yeah, some of them do feel they are being attacked or they go attack people, but it's all manifestation of cerebral malaria.
Thank you, Dr. Foje. Dr. Brown-Hilda, your last word on malaria, please. Malaria in Africa.
Well, unfortunately, it is still a very serious disease that affects Africans. And Dr. Foje also elaborate on some of the preventative measures, which included environmental, as well as some of the other ones we talked about. It has to be taken seriously because some of the symptoms can be, or end organ damages can be deadly. For those who live out of the endemic area, or those who used to be in Africa or endemic areas and move out of it, and they are visiting back home, they should remember that they probably have lost that partial immunity that they had, and have to take prophylaxis and continue to take those prophylaxis even after they come back, in accordance with the guidelines, depending on what medications. I think, that's probably what I can say.
Just in 30 seconds, Dr. Brown-Hilda, what's the dangers in going to just buy something, a medication when you're feeling malaria and just taking without seeing a doctor? In 30
well, you mean here or in general? In Africa?
In general, in Africa.
Well, just like any other disease, you have to be careful. Obviously, if you have malaria, you should start feeling better after a few days. If you are not, then you may have something else going on. Also, we also have to be cognizant of the fact that you have some counterfeit medications, especially in Africa. So we have to be aware of that. But just like any other disease, if you're not really sure about what you have, you probably want to seek medical advice before taking the medication. And if you have to take the medication and after a few days you are not improving, then you need to go to the hospital and try for someone to find out exactly what is going on with you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Brown-Hilda. Dr. Foje, in 20 seconds, your last word, please.
Yeah, malaria is very much with us, and we have to do everything to control it. But I wanted, as a surgeon, to end with this note that repeated malaria can lead to splenomegaly, a large spleen, which exposes itself to rupture, and so some malaria patients can actually rupture their spleen and come to the attention of the medical body by the shock and the ruptured spleen. Also, for us to remember that malaria is transmitted through the placenta to the baby and can either cause an abortion or can cause a low birth weight baby.
Thank you, Doc. Thank you, Dr. Forjay. If I can make your last word, please.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Brown-Hilda and Dr. Forjay, for coming in this Sunday. And thank you, listeners. Many people were quiet today. They didn't ask questions. But please, it's always good to share your story. You can still share your stories on our WhatsApp chat room. And, of course, we look forward to seeing you next Sunday. Don't forget the topic, unemployment among Africans and in Africa and in the diaspora. Divine.
Reverend Pam.
Thank you again to our guests, Dr. Brown-Hilda and Dr. Forjay. And I will just leave our viewers with an urgent message for them to visit our website. And one quick thing for anybody who might be afflicted with malaria right now. Dr. Brown-Hilda mentioned something about counterfeit drugs. That's actually one of our key topics. We'll be talking about that. But in the meantime, there is a scripture in Jeremiah 17:14 that says, "Heal me, O Lord, and I shall be healed." So malaria is not bigger than our Jesus. Over to you, Divine.
Thank you, and it's on that note that we end this week's broadcast. Thank you to Augusta Folabid in London, Joseph in Italy, Gideon in Germany. Please tell other people wherever you are on the planet that something is happening. By the way, you can go on our website. You can go on our Facebook page. You will listen to this broadcast over and over again. My name is Divine Chamakon. Thank you to Mumba Lingua for taking this broadcast to the four corners of the planet. We will be meeting you again next Sunday at the same time to talk about unemployment among Africans in Africa and in the diaspora. Thank you and goodbye to everybody.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Goodbye. God bless all of you.
Thank you.
Hello, who is from Iowa?